out to George Gascon and his administration asking for a meeting for them to explain why it is that they have not filed special circumstance in this case, as it's permitted under California law, and as the facts demanded in this case. In 19 days, you know what we've heard from George Gascon? Absolutely nothing. There's been no response. We haven't even been contacted back. We haven't been told any particular date that we can meet with them. We have a right under Marcy's law, under the California Constitution, to confer with the district attorney on the charges involved in the case. The family has that right. George Gascon is violating their Marcy's law right, their constitutional right, to confer with the district attorney as to why it is that he's choosing in this particular case not to file a special service. And it's interesting that we just recently learned that this is not the first time that Anthony Turner has been involved in somewhat of a similar situation. We know in this case that he kicked down the door of Miss Avan and then brutally murdered her. And now we learn that sometime in 2018, one of his ex-wives called Culver City Police Department, where he kicked down her door to get in and get after her when she upset him. This is a case that should be filed appropriately, and the appropriate charges demand that their special search be filed. But because of Gascon's blanket policy, he hasn't done so. And what is the result of that? It's the trauma to the family. I saw for myself firsthand when Anthony Turner walked out of court, free as a bird. In fact, he was escorted by the sheriff's department. He was given the protection of the law when the family doesn't get that protection of the law. He was given that freedom to walk out and go wherever he wants. And the face is on the family. The pain and the trauma that causes, I don't think that's something that George Gascon understands or appreciates. But there is an effect to his policies. It hurts the victims' families, and there has to be some consequences. Which is why we're all here today to demand from George Gascon. We want a meeting. We want you to explain to us why you're not filing a special search in this particular case. And we want the public to know the dangers that we're all facing with George Gascon's policies, and that calling him is the only way that we're going to get safety back in this area.
Sam, can you talk about the one exception we know about?
We know that George Gascon sometimes does make exceptions to his own policies. In fact, he had made a blanket policy that there would be no special allegations, particularly no special gun allegations. However, we know that meeting square that husband is seen on the ring camera pulling up behind a woman who's running inside, leaving the baby in the car, and shot right in front of her door. We know that in that case, he did break exception because it got such media coverage and such outrage in the media that he filed the special gun allegations in that case. But what people don't understand is, unfortunately, that defendant killed himself, so that didn't get the public attention, that he made an exception in that case. This family wants an answer. Why isn't there an exception filed in this case? This was a brutal murder of someone who's kicked in doors before of ex-domestic partners. Why aren't we filing the allegations that this family deserves in this particular case? And there's no answer, there's no explanation, and just no response from George Gascon's office. Would you like to come up?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you.
Oh, no.
So this is to recall George
You guys want to
Gascon.
speak down a little bit?
How can you recall somebody that committed campaign fraud?
Good morning and thank you for being here today. My name is Tanya Owen and I am the widow of Sergeant Steve Owen, who was brutally murdered and executed by a violent felon who was a documented gang member, a third striker who had only been released on parole for robbery 3 months before that fateful day of October 5th, 2016. On that day, my husband, Sergeant Steve Owen, was working as a field supervisor in the city of Lancaster when a 911 call was made to the sheriff's station. A woman reported that a man broke into her home and she was alone with her child. My husband responded, lights and siren blaring, which caused the suspect to flee the home. I believe the sound of those sirens saved the lives of that mother and her son. My husband was the first law enforcement officer to arrive at the scene. He immediately encountered the suspect and attempted to detain him at gunpoint. When that fateful shot rang out, hitting my husband on the forehead, completely disabling him. The suspect had a choice to flee He had a choice to flee the area, but instead he made the conscious decision and very deliberate decision to run up to my husband, who was laying on the pavement motionless. The suspect stood over my husband and at point blank shot him in the head 3 more times. Another shot to the forehead, a shot to his eye, a shot to the cheek. And he paused, and as an act of defiance, he shot my husband's badge. To me, as a retired law enforcement officer, this killer was sending a message that he did not care who stood in his way. If he's willing to kill a law enforcement officer, folks, who is he not willing to kill? On that fateful day, my husband, like many other law enforcement officers, stood between good and evil. After 4 years of fighting in the court for justice for my husband, on December 7th, 2020, George Gascon was sworn into office and changed everything we had been fighting for by removing the death penalty. Enhancements, and special circumstances. As victims of crimes, we were forced to hire a Marcy's Law attorney to fight the very person who is supposed to be protecting and standing up for all victims. George Gascon has abandoned all victims, including the family of Michelle Avan. Today, I stand before you as the co-chair of the recall to remove George Gascon from office and elect a district attorney who will fight for all victims. As of now, we have a lot of momentum. We've collected a lot of signatures, but this is a monumental task, and we still have a long way to go. Gascon is losing popularity every single day, and if this recall gets on the ballot, he will lose. But we have to get him on the ballot first. And we are going to need a significant amount of contributions and volunteers to make this happen. Los Angeles County, please understand, we the people still have a voice. I urge you to get involved and fight for accountability both by criminals and this district attorney. Please go to the recallgeorgegascon.com or recall George Gascon now, print the recall form, get signatures in your community, and submit it to the address provided. Folks, this is not about politics, as Mr. Gascon likes to talk about. It has nothing to do with that. You know, we encourage you to get educated, get involved, and let's take back Los Angeles County. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for anybody? Thank you.
You want Gascon to be recalled, but you also want him to look into your case. I mean, it seems like there's a conflict there.
It shouldn't be a conflict. First of all, he has an absolute duty under the Constitution to meet with this family and give them an explanation why it is that in their mother's case, they don't get the right to get the special circumstance. It's in our California laws. All we're asking is that he simply enforce California law. He just unilaterally is choosing not to do so. And under the Marcy's Law, under the California Constitution, he is mandated to meet with this family and give them an explanation. He's ignoring that. He's not even doing that. And for that reason, that's why this family is here demanding his recall as well. He's not even following California Constitution. This man is willing to ignore California law, California Constitution. The only people he's willing to advocate for are the criminals and those who are charged with crimes. But the families, he's not even meeting with them. He's not even talking to them. He's completely ignoring the victims of crime. And sadly, it isn't until you become a victim of crime or a family member becomes a victim of crime that you realize how much danger we have in LA County under George Gascon's policies.
What is the murderer facing now?
He has 2 counts filed against him. One is murder, and the second is first-degree residential burglary, which is interesting because that second charge that they have filed tells you that the prosecutor, George Gascon's office, acknowledges that this murder was committed in the course of a first-degree burglary. That is a special circumstance. That itself is all we're asking him to do. File that special circumstance, which you're admitting occurred because you're filing the charge. But he's not filing a special circumstance. And because of that, what are the consequences? This family gets to basically walk out there in the public and can any day now walk across this murder of their own mother. That simply isn't right. The trauma to the victims is something George Gascon has completely been discounting since he began with his policies.
So he's out on bail.
He's out on bail. Something he could not have done as special circumstances were filed in this case. That's what the significance of these measures are and the impact it has on victims.
Thank you all.
Any other questions?
Unless there are other questions.
Yeah, if we got more questions, I think we.
Are there any other questions? Let's take questions.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Sorry for your help.
Thank you.
The bail in this case is going to be a bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
If he is convicted, what does he face it with just the way it is now?
It depends on what degree of murder it is determined to be. If it's first degree, it's 25 to life. If it's second degree, it's 15 to life. But let's all understand one thing. It's critical to understand. It doesn't matter what the charges are and what the ultimate sentence is. Many people don't appreciate in California. For years, there have been laws passed that people didn't understand the impact of. There's the elder parole law, which basically says that all a person has to do is serve 20 years and be over the age of 50, and they're eligible for parole. And we just saw what happens with parole. Saran just got paroled because the LA County DA's office didn't send a single prosecutor there to oppose that parole. People can get out who have killed, and that's all he will end up serving potentially is 20 years before he's eligible for parole, irrespective of what he ultimately gets sentenced to. And that is only because the special circumstances have not been filed. If special circumstances are filed, he would not be eligible for parole. So that would be off the table. This family wouldn't have to see him walking around in public. There would be a lot of consequences that would benefit the victim's family that in this case we're losing because George Gascon just has a personal feelings about changing everything that California law has on his own, unilaterally, without really any basis to do so. Let me add one last thing. George Gascon's platform from day one has been that 40 years of tough on crime has failed us. Absolutely false. I don't know where he's getting his statistics from. All you have to do is Google it. Back in the 90s, before the tough on crime law started passing, we had over 2,500 per 100 of violent crime. It has dropped to over 500 per 100 of the violent crimes that are committed in LA County. There is a significant drop in violent crime since the tough on crime law has started. For the first time, we're now seeing crime rates reversed. For the first time, now they're going up. Crime rate in LA County is spiking. He promised us that we'd be safer. We are not safer under George Gascon.
Is there any Spanish video that you need a Spanish soundbite? Spanish? No?
Any other questions? I think we can. Is there any last?
I just want to also add that we just buried my mother. I just also want to add that we just buried my mother this past Friday, and we had to do a closed casket funeral. Like our attorney said, there are accounts that he's done this before. If he gets out, what makes you guys think that he won't come and do this to your parents, to your mothers, your sisters, your daughters, your nieces, your grandmothers? Please, just take it into our perspective and reflect it on your own family and see the urgency and what we're trying to tell you guys. We're trying to make sure that this doesn't happen again, not only with Anthony Turner, but with other people in the community as well. If this were to happen to your family, do you think that life without